Let's continue the Truth Teller series. I would like us to tell the truth about Josh Heupel, the head coach of Tennessee. Josh Heupel. What's the truth? What do you think about him? He has 30 wins over his last 3 seasons. Okay, so just to give you some Tennessee context, that is the most they've had since the golden era of Tennessee, really, in color TV history, and that's 1996 through 1998, the Philip Fulmer era. Won a national title during that stretch. Well, Heupel's won 30 games over his past 3 years. That's the kind of stuff they were doing back then. People wouldn't put him on par right now with where they had Phil Fulmer in the late 90s, early 2000s. Of course, you got to win a title. 10 or trash, title or bust. When I hear people tell the Heupel story or they give their opinion on him, it's like some of his history's memory hold to me, if that makes any sense. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Josh Heupel to me is an example of right guy at the right place and time, because he came there from UCF as did his AD. So Danny White was the AD at UCF, and Tennessee hires him, and then Danny White hires his head coach at UCF, Josh Heupel. But here's what people sometimes forget. They had just gone 6-4 at UCF in 2020. I think their record had fallen off a little bit each year since he took over for Frost, since he got there. There were whispers around Orlando that if they didn't significantly pick up the pace the following year, that Heupel would be in the hot seat conversation. And he gets hired by Tennessee, and it becomes a moot point. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, that's peculiar. But yet the guy who hired him is the guy who knows him better than anyone. So I'm gonna trust Danny White on this one. That was the extent of my reaction when Josh Heupel got hired. And he's gone there. And from 2008 to 2021, prior to Josh Heupel's arrival in Knoxville, from 2008 to 2021, they didn't have a single double-digit win season. 2 of his first 3 years have been double-digit win seasons. But think about this. In that 13-year stretch where Tennessee was out wandering in the wilderness, it's like there are the Israelites, there's Tennessee, kind of following them. 8 of those 13 seasons, they were 500 or worse. Inexcusable amounts of ineptitude at Tennessee, which just goes to show you how bad the wrong hire can compound matters. And then when you follow the wrong hire with another wrong hire with another wrong hire, just flaming bags of trash in your win and loss records when you pull up the Wikipedia page. And then Josh Heupel came in, and he's rectified it. So they're in a very weird spot right now. To tell you the truth about how I feel about Tennessee, they're in a very weird spot. On one hand, I think it could be a transition year for them this year. I'm not as high on Tennessee this year as the odds makers are, as many people around here are. Since I live in Nashville, I hear a ton of Tennessee talk. I'm not as high on Tennessee as some people are. That's not a terrible thing. It's just that's going to happen in college football. That's transition. That's going to happen every now and then. The reason I say that's a weird spot is because I'm very high on Tennessee's program. And I'm extremely high on what happened last year. All people remember is they got blown out at Ohio State. That's the way they ended the year. But that's one game. What I remember is, for all the talk about how big an offensive genius Josh Heupel is, and he is that, how'd they win last year? They were good offensively, but there were several extended periods last year of offensive drought. Let me cut in really quick and ask, look, prayer hands, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you think you're subscribed, check and make sure. Over 50% of you aren't. It's free, it doesn't sign you up for anything, and it helps us keep the show free, college football year-round, the way God intended it. All right, back to the clip. Defense is what won them games. They had a top 10 defense last year. To me, one of the surest signs of upward mobility, of upward trending as a team and a program is when the side of the ball you don't specialize in starts to elevate. Lincoln Riley is a classic example of the other side of this coin. Lincoln Riley scored 50 every game at Oklahoma, but they needed to because they were giving up 45 every game. And now he's gone to USC. And to a certain extent, he had the same problems at the outset. They were terrible defensively. He made the proper hires, and it looks like they're getting better there. But at Tennessee, like Heupel last year, it's defense. It was a defensive-oriented team. And so that on one hand makes me feel good about the trajectory of the program, even if they have a temporary hiccup this year. I still feel that about Tennessee. Now, I could be wrong. They could go 11-1 this year. But I'm just saying, even if they're 8-4 this year, I'd still feel the same way about him. Now, speaking of the way people feel about him, the Nico Iamaleava stuff is still fairly fresh in everyone's mind, but that'll fade. In the public's mind, they got too much else going on in their lives. They're worried about their own team. They're worried about everything else. That they're not going to remember intimate details of how Josh Heupel handled the Nico Iamaleava drama in spring of 2025. Tennessee fans will. So that really endeared him to Tennessee fans, as it should, because he finally stood up when so many other coaches were bending a knee to players and representatives of players asking for this and that. And Josh Heupel finally just chested up and said, yeah, go on. Go on. You know what? Even if we have to take a step back this year, go on. We don't need that here. And he got a standing round of applause from his fan base. And I applaud him too, even as I looked at it and I said, I'm not a believer this will necessarily help their overall record this upcoming year. It may help their standing as a program overall. And I want you to also think about this. If Tennessee's the kind of team that's just scrappy and they got the hateful 3 stars, which are worth their weight in gold, if they just got enough of those, sprinkled with some 4- and 5-star talent, but if their nucleus just decides to go all in for Josh Heupel and they're the kind that'll take your kneecaps out in a close game, then you may find yourself late in the year and Tennessee's just battered and bloodied, but they're still coming for more and they're still in the fringe of the playoff race. And you may find yourself saying, those kids are playing for him in the way they are, partly because of how he reacted in the spring to a guy that didn't necessarily want to be all in. I could see that. So that's the truth to me about Josh Heupel right now.